twin moons of Arcanus floated above the night sky, shining silver light on the stone houses of the alien village. The air smelled of smoke and salt, carried from the deep sea, and in the shadows of the tall pillars, a young alien girl walked quickly, her steps nervous but her heart strong. Her name was Lyra, daughter of the temple priest. Her skin was pale blue, glowing faintly under the moons, and her eyes carried a strange fire. The fire of someone who dared to dream beyond the rules of her people. Everyone in the village had been told the same story since childhood. Humans are dangerous, humans are liars, humans bring only ruin. To speak with them was shameful, to touch them was sin, and to love them was death. But Lyra had done the unthinkable. She had met a human. His name was Daniel, a wanderer from the stars. His ship had fallen from the sky many cycles ago, broken and useless. The villagers wanted him killed at once, but Lyra had hidden him in the caves by the cliffs. She had brought him food, water, and medicines. At first she told herself it was only kindness. But as the days turned into weeks, kindness grew into something else. Daniel spoke in a voice unlike the harsh tones of her people. His words were soft, his laughter warm. He told her stories of Earth, of green forests, rushing rivers, and cities that touched the clouds. He spoke of music, of freedom, and of love. Lyra listened, wide-eyed, feeling as if she had lived her whole life in a cage, and now someone was showing her the open sky. One night, under the glow of the twin moons, Daniel touched her hand. For a moment, the world stopped. She felt the warmth of his skin, so different from her own cold touch. Her heart raced, and though she knew it was forbidden, she did not pull away. From that moment, she knew she was lost. But love does not stay hidden for long. One evening, a hunter roamed the village, followed her trail to the cliffs. He saw the human, saw Lyra standing too close, saw the fire in her eyes, and he ran back to the council, his voice loud with anger. The next morning, the village bells rang. The council gathered in the square, the crowd thick and restless. They called Lyra forward. The hunter spoke of betrayal, of shame, of a girl who loved a human. Gasps filled the air. Stones were raised, curses thrown. Lyra stood tall, though fear shook her heart. She did not deny it. She looked at the council and said only one word. Yes, yes, she had loved. Yes, she had touched a human. Yes, she would do it again. The crowd screamed. The council's leader, an old man with silver horns, raised his staff. Then you shall pay the price, he said. You shall be bound to the sacrificial pillar. Your blood will wash away this shame, and the gods will see that no alien heart belongs to a human. Lyra's hands were tied. Stones were thrown at her as she was dragged across the square. Children pointed, women spat, men shouted, but she did not bow her head. She thought of Daniel, far away in the cliffs. She hoped he would not try to come for her, for they would kill him without mercy. Yet deep in her heart, she whispered his name. Her lips moved silently, calling for him across the night, because love, once lit, cannot be put out by chains or stones. And somewhere beyond the hills, Daniel felt it. He felt the pull in his chest, the whisper in his soul. He did not know yet what had happened, but he knew one thing: Lyra was in danger, and no matter what it cost him, he would return. The sacrificial pillar stood at the center of the village square. It was older than memory, carved from black stone that shone like glass under the moons. Every child grew up fearing it. Every adult bowed before it. The pillar was not only stone, it was law, it was judgment, it was death. And now, Lyra was chained to it. Her arms were bound behind her back, her legs heavy with iron cuffs. Cold rings cut into her skin, but her heart beat louder than the pain. Crowds gathered around her, their eyes glowing with anger and fear. Men and women shouted, throwing small stones that left red marks on her shoulders. Children hid behind their mothers, whispering, "She touched a human. She betrayed the gods. She deserves the fire." The priest, her own father, stood at the steps of the temple. His face was like stone, his eyes filled with shame. But Lyra looked at him and saw something else, a flicker of sorrow, quickly hidden. He did not speak for her. He did not move to save her, because even a father could not fight the will of the council. The council leader raised his staff, his voice cutting through the cries of the crowd. "Lyra, daughter of the priest, you are bound here for your crime. You have loved the enemy. You have broken the sacred law. At dawn, your life will be given to the fire. The gods will judge your soul." The crowd cheered, their anger louder than the drums that began to beat. The sound was steady, heavy, like a heartbeat of doom. Lyra closed her eyes, but her thoughts did not stay with the crowd. Her thoughts flew to the cliffs, to the caves by the sea, to the human who had touched her hand and changed her life. Daniel, was he safe, or had they found him too? She prayed he was far away, escaping to the stars, but a small voice in her heart whispered another hope, that he would come, that he would not leave her, even if it meant death. The night grew colder, but the fire pits around the pillar burned hot. Guards walked in circles, holding spears tipped with silver. They watched Lyra as if she were already a ghost. Her lips were dry, her body weak from hunger, but still, her spirit did not break. When the villagers grew tired of shouting, they began to sing, low and haunting, the song of sacrifice. It was a song every child knew, but Lyra had never felt its weight until now. The words spoke of cleansing, of blood, of purity. They spoke of cutting away shame with fire. And the people sang louder, as if their voices would blind the gods from seeing their own sins. As the flames danced, Lyra looked up at the sky. The twin moons were high, surrounded by stars. She remembered Daniel's voice telling her about Earth's sky, how humans looked at the stars and dreamed of freedom, how they believed love was stronger than law. For the first time she wondered, was it true? Could love fight against chains and fire? The council left her there, guarded but alone. The crowd returned to their homes, satisfied that the gods would soon be fed. The square grew quiet. Only the crackle of fire and the heavy steps of guards remained. Lyra leaned against the pillar, her body aching, her mind heavy. Yet even in chains, she whispered his name, Daniel. Her voice was too soft for the guards to hear, but she felt it travel into the night, carried on the wind, far away beyond the hills. Daniel moved like a shadow. He had seen the flames rising from the village square. He had heard the distant drums, the song of sacrifice. And though he did not yet see Lyra, he knew she was there, bound to the pillar, waiting for him. The village slept in false peace, but in the darkness one human was walking closer, one human whose love was stronger than fear, one human whose courage would soon test the strength of the pillar itself. Lyra closed her eyes, the firelight painting her face in gold and red. The night seemed endless, the pillar unbreakable. But somewhere deep inside, a spark of hope refused to die. She was chained to the pillar of shame, yes, but she believed in the promise Daniel had given her under the moons, the promise that he would never leave her alone. And so, as the drums slowed and the night grew silent, she waited, her body weak, but her heart burning, because she knew tomorrow was the day of sacrifice, but tomorrow might also be the day of return. The night was deep and heavy, the village silent except for the crackle of the sacrificial fires. Lyra was chained to the black stone pillar, her body weak, her spirit trembling but not broken. She whispered one name again and again, a prayer to the stars. Daniel. And far away, beyond the cliffs and the forest, the human answered, not with words but with action. Daniel had not left. He had not run to the mountains or hidden in the caves. The moment he heard the drums and saw the glow of fire over the village, he knew what it meant. They had taken Lyra. They would kill her at dawn, and he could not allow that. His ship was broken, his weapons few, but humans were not creatures of comfort. Humans were creatures of fight, of stubborn courage. Daniel carried only a small pack, a blade made of steel, and the burning fire of love in his chest. He tied rags around his boots to soften his steps. He rubbed ash on his face to hide his skin. The villagers hated humans, but tonight he would walk among them unseen, like a shadow with a beating heart. The forest whispered around him as he moved. Every sound seemed louder. The snap-o, a twig, the call of a bird, the hiss of wind through leaves. But Daniel did not stop. He thought of Lyra's eyes, the way she had touched his hand, the way her voice shook when she laughed. He thought of how she had risked everything to save him when his ship crashed. Now it was his turn to save her. As he neared the village, he crouched low behind rocks and broken walls. The guards at the edge of the village carried spears tipped with glowing stones. They spoke in sharp voices, but Daniel could not understand their words. Still, he understood their meaning. Danger, suspicion, death. He waited until one guard turned away, then slipped through the shadows like smoke. The streets were empty, but the fires near the temple still burned. Their light touched the square, and in that light he saw her, Lyra, chained to the sacrificial pillar, her head bowed, her skin bruised, but her spirit still alive. Even from a distance, Daniel felt the weight of her suffering, and his jaw tightened. He whispered her name, though she could not hear it. Lyra, I'm here. The square was filled with guards, their armor glowing faintly, their eyes sharp. There was no way to walk to her openly. Daniel studied the scene, his human mind calculating. He saw the weak points, a gap in the guard's path, a shadow between two pillars, the sound of drums that could hide his footsteps. Humans were not the strongest, nor the fastest, but they were clever. And tonight, cleverness was his weapon. He moved closer, step by step, his body pressed against the walls. The heat of the fire touched his face. The smell of smoke filled his lungs. A guard turned, and Daniel froze. For a heartbeat, he thought he was seen, but then the guard spat on the ground and walked away. Daniel released the breath he had been holding and slipped forward again. Now he was only a few steps away from the pillar. He could see Lyra's face clearly, her lips dry, her eyes closed. He wanted to call out, but he forced himself to stay silent. One sound, one mistake, and she would die before dawn. A whisper of movement caught his ear. Two guards were speaking nearby, their voices low. Daniel could not understand their language fully, but he heard enough. They were talking about the sacrifice, about the fire that would rise with the dawn, about how the gods would drink her blood. Daniel's fists tightened, his rage hot. No god, no council, no chain would take her from him. The night stretched on, each second heavy. Daniel hid in the shadows, waiting for the right moment. He studied the chains on the pillar, thick and ancient, carved with strange symbols. He knew they would not break easily, but he had no choice. He would tear them apart with his hands if he had to. Lyra stirred, her head lifting slowly, her eyes opening weakly. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. She saw a shadow in the dark, a figure she knew. Her heart leapt, Daniel. Her lips moved, whispering his name without sound. And in that silent exchange, hope was born again. Daniel pressed a finger to his lips, a signal for silence. Then he pointed to the chains, his eyes fierce. Lyra nodded faintly, her body too weak to speak, but her spirit answered him with trust. She believed. The guards grew restless, walking faster, their spears tapping against the ground. The fires crackled, the drums slowed. Midnight was near, and Daniel knew. If he was going to act, it had to be soon. He crouched lower, his blade ready, his heart steady. Humans were not gods, humans were not perfect, but when they chose to love, they loved beyond reason, and when they chose to fight, they fought beyond fear. Daniel whispered to himself, for Lyra. Then, like a shadow turned into fire, he moved. The square slept under the red glow of the fire pits. Most villagers had gone home, but guards remained, pacing in circles around the sacrificial pillar. Their shadows stretched long and sharp across the stone ground. Lyra hung in silence, her chains heavy, her body weak, her lips moved softly, whispering only one word again and again. Daniel. And in the shadows of the broken wall, Daniel crouched, watching, waiting. He had slipped past the outer guards, he had seen her face, he had felt her eyes find him. Now his heart beat like the drums that shook the village only hours ago. But he could not act yet, not while so many eyes were awake. Two guards stopped near the pillar, their voices low. Daniel did not understand every word of their alien tongue, but he caught enough. The dawn, the fire god, the knife of bone, the blood must fall. Their words were like poison in his ears. They spoke of Lyra's life as if it were nothing, as if she were no more than fuel for a flame. Daniel pressed his hand against the wall to steady himself. His chest burned with rage, but he forced his body to stay still. Rage would not break chains. Anger would not outsmart guards. Only patience, only planning. The guards moved on, leaving Lyra alone in the circle of firelight. Daniel shifted closer, silent as a shadow. He could see her clearly now, her skin marked with bruises, her breath shallow. But when her eyes opened and found his, he saw something stronger than pain. He saw trust. She was not afraid. She believed he would not leave her. Daniel raised a finger to his lips, telling her to stay silent. Then he pointed to the chains, showing her that he had a plan. Lyra gave the smallest nod, her eyes shining with tears. It was enough. Hours passed like years. The guards yawned, their steps slower, their voices dull with sleep. Daniel used the darkness like a cloak, moving from shadow to shadow. Once, a guard turned and his spearlight swept dangerously close. Daniel pressed himself flat against the stone, holding his breath until the guard passed. His heart thundered, but his body obeyed. Calm, tient, hidden. At last he reached the base of the pillar. The black stone was cold under his hands, the chains thicker than his arm. Symbols were carved into the metal, glowing faintly like dying embers. This was not just iron. It was something older, heavier, touched by strange power. Daniel pulled once, testing. The chains did not move, but the sound made Lyra flinch. Daniel quickly pressed a hand to her arm, soft, reassuring. I will break them, he whispered, though she could not hear the words. She felt his promise in the touch. A new danger stirred. Voices carried from the temple steps. Two priests walked out, their robes dragging along the ground. They carried small bowls of fire, their faces painted in red ash. They began to chant, their words slow and heavy. Daniel could not understand the meaning, but the sound made his blood run cold. This was no ordinary ritual. This was the beginning of her death. He hid behind the pillar, his blade ready, his breath tight. The priests moved closer, pouring oil into the fire pits, feeding the flames. The guards joined them, humming with the chant. Lyra's eyes closed, her lips trembling with silent prayer. Daniel leaned close and whispered again, "I am here." She did not hear his voice, but she felt his presence, and she opened her eyes, meeting his. Hope burned again, small but unbroken. The chanting grew louder, echoing through the square. The flames climbed higher, painting the night in orange and red. Daniel knew he had little time. He studied the guards, the rhythm of their steps, the pattern of their eyes. He counted heartbeats, waiting for the moment. Humans were hunters, and Daniel was hunting now. Hunting for a chance, hunting for hope. The priests finished their chant and returned to the temple. The guards settled, their backs to the pillar. Daniel exhaled slowly. This was his chance. He pressed his blade against the chaw. In pushing with all his strength, the metal screeched softly but did not break. He gritted his teeth, sweat dripping from his brow. Again he pushed, his muscles screaming. The chain bent, just slightly. Lyra gasped, hope flickering in her eyes, but the sound drew a guard's attention. Daniel froze, his body still as stone. The guard turned, his spear glowing, his eyes sharp. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then another guard called out, and the first turned away. Daniel let out the air he had been holding. He leaned closer to Lyra, his forehead almost touching hers. Her breath was weak, but her eyes were fire. He whispered again, this time with steel in his voice. "Tomorrow they will not take you. I will break these chains. I will burn their fire. I will stand for you." Lyra's tears glistened, but she smiled faintly. She believed the gods could demand her blood, the council could call her a traitor, but her heart belonged to him, and he had returned. The drums had ended, the night was quiet again, but in that quiet, two hearts beat together, one chained to stone, one hiding in shadows, both waiting for the dawn, both ready for fire and blood, because whispers in the dark could be louder than shouts in the day, and their whispers promised only one thing: they would fight, together. The dawn crept over the horizon, painting the alien sky with streaks of gold and crimson. The village square was alive again, filled with voices, footsteps, and the beating of heavy drums. The sacrificial pillar stood tall in the center, black and unyielding, and chained to it was Lyra, her body weak, her spirit still burning. The crowd gathered, hundreds of eyes fixed on her. They threw stones and curses, shouting the same words: traitor, sinner, unclean. Her skin bled, but she did not bow her head. She whispered the only name that gave her strength: Daniel. The priests marched out of the temple, their robes trailing across the ground. They carried the bone knife, carved from the remains of a beast killed in ancient wars. Its blade gleamed under the rising sun. The council leader raised his staff, his voice echoing across the square. By this knife the shame will be cut away. By this fire the gods will be fed. The crowd roared in approval. The drums grew louder, their rhythm like a war cry. Lyra closed her eyes, bracing for the end, but somewhere in the crowd, a shadow moved. Daniel. He had hidden through the night, watching every guard, every step, every chant. Now the time for silence was over. He pulled the blade from his belt and moved forward. Each step was fire in his chest, each breath a storm in his lungs. Humans were not welcome here, but humans were stubborn, and he would not let them take her. The first guard turned, shock flashing across his face. Daniel struck fast, the blade slashing the spear aside. The guard fell with a cry. The crowd gasped. Chaos erupted. The human is here!" they shouted. The priests froze, their chants breaking. The council leader's staff shook in his hand. Daniel ran into the circle of fire, his eyes fixed on Lyra. She saw him, her heart leaping. He had come, he had returned. Guards rushed at him, spears flashing. Daniel fought like a cornered wolf. He was only one man, but his strikes were fast, his will unbroken. A spear cut across his arm, blood spilling, but he did not stop. He pushed forward, carving a path to the pillar. The crowd screamed in terror and awe. They had never seen a human fight like this. He was smaller than their warriors, weaker in body, but he fought with something they could not understand: love. At last he reached Lyra, her eyes filled with tears as he fell to his knees, gripping the chains. They were thick, carved with ancient runes. He pulled, his muscles burning, his skin tearing. The chains groaned but held. The guards closed in, their spears ready to pierce. Daniel roared, a sound that shook the air. He pulled harder, his whole body trembling with rage and love. The chain cracked, a single line running across the black metal. Lyra gasped, her heart pounding. Another pull, another scream, and the chain broke. The sound echoed like thunder. The crowd fell silent, shocked. The sacrificial pillar had never been broken, but the human had done it. Daniel cut the rest of the bindings, pulling Lyra into his arms. She collapsed against him, weak but alive. Her voice trembled. "I knew you would come. And he answered, breathless, always. The silence did not last. The council leader raised his staff, screaming, "Kill him! Kill them both!" The guards surged forward. The crowd shouted with rage. The drums pounded again, faster, harder, the air filled with chaos. Daniel stood, holding Lyra close. He turned to face the wave of enemies, his eyes fierce. "Then come," he growled, and they came. Spears clashed, fire roared, blood spilled. Daniel fought with everything he had, his blade flashing, his body bleeding. Lyra clung to him, whispering words of strength. The pillar behind them cracked and broke further, pieces falling into the fire. The square trembled as if the gods themselves were watching. The people saw something they had never seen before, a human standing against their law, against their gods, a human who would die, but not let go. For a moment, fear turned into silence. Silence turned into doubt. They began to whisper, "Why does he fight so hard? Why does he bleed for her? Is this love stronger than the gods?" The battle raged, but the story was already written in their hearts. They could kill him, they could kill her, but they could not kill the truth they had just seen. Daniel broke another spear, his body staggering, but his arm was still strong enough to lift Lyra. He pulled her close, their faces inches apart. "If we die together," he said, and Lyra smiled through her tears. "Then I am not afraid." The fire roared higher, swallowing the broken pillar. The sky burned red with dawn, and in the center of it all stood one human, one alien girl, and a love that refused to be chained. The sacrificial pillar lay broken, its black stone split and scattered. The sacred chains lay shattered on the ground, glowing faintly as their power died. The villagers gasped, their voices trembling with fear. For the first time in their history, the pillar had been broken. And it was broken not by gods, not by priests, but by a human. Daniel stood in the circle of fire, his chest heaving, his blade red with blood. Beside him, Lyra clung weakly to his arm, her body shaking, but her eyes burned bright with hope. The impossible had happened, and she was free. The council leader roared in fury, his staff raised high. "This is blasphemy," he cried. "This is war against the gods. Kill them both. Let the fire take them." The drums began again, faster, louder, calling the guards to strike. Dozens of armored soldiers surged forward, their spears flashing in the rising sun. The ground shook with their charge, their war cries splitting the air. Daniel tightened his grip on the blade, pulling Lyra close. He knew he could not win against so many, but he would not let them touch her. The first guard lunged, his spear thrusting like lightning. Daniel twisted, knocking the strike aside, then drove his blade into the man's chest. The soldier fell and the crowd screamed, but another came, and another. Daniel fought like fire itself, his body bleeding, his muscles burning. Every strike was fueled by love, every step by desperation. Lyra clutched at him, whispering through her tears, "Don't stop. Don't stop, Daniel." Her words gave him strength. Each time his body begged to fall, her voice kept him standing. A spear cut across his side, blood pouring down his ribs. He staggered, nearly falling, but when he looked at her, bruised, chained only moments ago, he stood taller. He blocked another strike, then kicked a soldier back into the fire pit. The flames swallowed the man. The crowd roared in horror. The square became chaos. Smoke, blood, and screams. The broken pillar cracked further, falling into the flames, sending sparks into the sky. The temple shook as if the gods themselves were angry. The villagers shrank back, torn between hatred and fear, for they had seen the impossible, the human breaking sacred chains, and now they saw the unthinkable, the human standing against an army alone. The priests shouted louder, their chants desperate. "Feed the gods, feed the fire, kill the sinner." But some in the crowd no longer shouted, some only watched in silence, and some whispered, "Why does he fight like this? Why does he bleed for her? Would any of us fight so for love?" Daniel staggered, his vision blurring. 3 guards attacked at once, their spears closing in. He threw himself in front of Lyra, his body the shield. The spear struck his arms, his chest, tearing flesh. Pain roared through him, white and burning. But he did not fall. He held his ground, his blade swinging wide. One soldier fell, another dropped his weapon in fear. The last stepped back, eyes wide. Daniel spat blood, his voice a growl. "You will not touch her." Lyra cried out, holding him as best she could, her hands pressed against his wounds, her tears falling onto his skin. "Please, don't die, Daniel, please." Her words shook the air, for even the villagers felt something in her voice, something stronger than law, stronger than fear. The fire grew wild, leaping higher, spreading from pit to pit. The square filled with smoke, the air thick and choking. The broken pillar collapsed completely, sending sparks like stars into the dawn. The people stumbled back, afraid. Some whispered that the gods were angry. Others whispered that the gods were silent, that maybe the humans' love was stronger than their gods. The council leader slammed his staff against the stone, shouting, "Cowards! Fight him! Kill him now!" But no one moved. The guards hesitated, their eyes uncertain. They had seen his wounds, seen his courage, and something inside them broke. If the gods were real, why had the chains cracked? If the gods demanded blood, why had the human not fallen? Daniel's body shook, his knees almost giving, but he looked at Lyra, and in her eyes he saw not fear, he saw faith. She still believed in him. And so he stood, he pulled her close, whispering into her ear, "If I die with you." Her tears fell against his cheek as she whispered back, "Then I am not afraid." The fire raged, the smoke swirled. The people no longer shouted, no longer cursed. They watched, silent, as one human bled but did not fall, as one alien girl held him like he was the last star in the sky. And in that silence, something changed. Blood dripped onto the stone, fire danced around them. But love, fragile, forbidden, impossible love, stood taller than both. And though the gods had demanded sacrifice, what the people saw was not death. What they saw was life, the life of a human who loved beyond reason, and the life of an alien who would rather die and let go. The fire roared through the square, swallowing wood, banners, and broken stone. Smoke curled into the sky like black wings. The villagers stepped back, their angry cries fading into whispers. For in the center of the chaos stood one human and one alien girl, bleeding, trembling, but still standing. Daniel's chest heaved with each breath, his shirt torn and soaked with blood. His arms shook, but he held his blade steady. Beside him, Lyra clung to his shoulder, her own body weak, but her spirit burning bright. They leaned on each other, and together they looked stronger than an army. The council leader raised his staff again, shouting through the smoke, "Do not be fooled. The gods demand blood. Strike them down." But his voice was no longer steady, for even he had seen the impossible. The chains had broken, the pillar had fallen, the fire had not consumed them, and the human still stood. The guards hesitated, their spears heavy in their hands. Their eyes flicked from the human to the girl, then to the burning sky. Some stepped back, others lowered their weapons. The crowd murmured in confusion. The old song of sacrifice seemed smaller now, drowned by the sight before them. Daniel swayed on his feet, his body screaming in pain. But when Lyra touched his face, he smiled faintly. "Are you ready?" he whispered. Her lips trembled, but she nodded. "As long as I am with you." The words gave him strength. With one last push of his will, Daniel turned to the crowd, his voice hoarse but fierce. "You call me enemy, you call her traitor, but look at what we have done. Your chains broke, your pillar fell, and still we live, do you not see? Love is stronger than your fear, stronger than your gods, stronger than your laws." The crowd fell silent, every word striking like thunder. The priests tried to chant louder, but their voices cracked. The council leader slammed his staff against the stone again and again, but no power came. The gods did not answer. Then, in the silence, a woman in the crowd whispered, "He fights for her." A man whispered back, "He bleeds for her." Another voice rose, trembling, "Would any of us do the same?" The whispers spread like fire through dry grass. Doubt filled the villagers' hearts. Fear turned into wonder, and wonder turned into awe. The guards lowered their spears fully, no longer willing to kill. The council leader screamed in rage, "Fools! The gods will strike us all! Do you not see?" But no lightning fell, no voice thundered from the heavens, only the crackle of fire and the steady sound of one human's breath. Daniel tightened his hold on Lyra. They moved slowly, step by step, through the smoke. The guards parted, unsure. The crowd stepped back, silent. Not one hand lifted to stop them. The temple itself groaned as flames licked its pillars. The roof cracked, pieces falling into the square. The once mighty place of judgment burned like dry wood. The people stared as their god's house collapsed, and still, the human and the alien girl walked forward, side by side. When they reached the edge of the square, Daniel nearly fell. Lyra caught him, though her strength was fading too. She looked back at the people, her voice clear and steady. "You call me traitor, but I have only loved. If that is a crime, then let love be my God." Her words rang out over the crackling fire. The villagers bowed their heads, not in anger, but in shame. For the first time, they wondered if they had been blind all along. Daniel and Lyra disappeared into the smoke. their bodies broken, but their hearts unbroken. Step by step, they left the square of hate. Step by step, they walked into legend. Later, when the fire died and the square turned to ash, the people would gather and whisper, "They lived." They walked through blood and flame, and they lived. Some would still curse them, still cling to the old gods, but others would tell the story in secret, a story of a human and an alien girl who broke chains and defied gods for love. The tale spread from village to village, then from city to city, and in time, even across the stars, for no wall, no law, no silence could hold back a story born of blood and fire. Children would grow up hearing of the girl who was chained, and the man who broke the chains, of the fire that tried to consume them and failed, of the love that stood taller than gods, and many would whisper the words to themselves in the dark. If even a human and an alien could love, then why not us? As for Daniel and Lyra, they vanished into the wilderness. Some said they escaped to the stars. Others said they built a life hidden far away. No one truly knew, but the truth was this: they were together, and that was enough. On a hill beneath the twin moons, they rested at last, Daniel's body broken, Lyra's arms around him, their eyes lifted to the stars, and in that silence, they both smiled, because their love had not only survived, it had changed a world. And though the villagers would tell the story in whispers, it was a story that would never die, a story of love that shook the stars.